Hey there, everybody, and welcome to Error-Free eDiscovery, an introduction to intuitive standardization. So, my name is Jamie McGaugh. My co-founder is Austin Buell, and together we are Easy Company Consulting. Easy Company offers consulting services and designs digital products for the eDiscovery industry. And we do so through a methodology that we like to call intuitive standardization. Intuitive standardization is a confluence of design thinking and process engineering using multiple proven methods from across the spectrum that we find together improve efficiency while eliminating errors. And that's what we're here to talk about today. Now, we call this intuitive standardization, but you might be more familiar with it through the phone in your pocket. Apple is the best intuitive standardization company in the world. Their products are intuitive, which is why my daughter can unlock my iPhone anytime she wants. They're beautiful, which makes my daughter want to use it. And it's a consistent experience no matter which of my devices my daughter steals. She can still hack into it, buy something on Amazon, watch whatever she wants on Netflix the same way, regardless if it's my phone, my tablet, etc. And we want to apply this same consistency and beauty to the way eDiscovery operates. Another example you might be familiar with is Ferrari. The Ferrari F1 pit crew can change 4 tires in a little under 2 seconds, while it takes me about 2 hours to change 1 tire on the side of the road. But what's most impressive about what Ferrari can do on the racetrack is how they can translate that experience to other specialist industries. For example, the Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital in the UK asked the Ferrari pit crew to take a look at some videos of surgeries they'd performed, looking for opportunities to reduce errors and maximize efficiency. The pit crew took a look, provided some recommendations, and in the end, the Children's Hospital was able to reduce patient errors by 20%. Now, this is amazing for the pit crew, for the children, but it's also amazing for all of us here today because we can translate intuitive standardization to any specialist industry, and that includes eDiscovery. And right now, eDiscovery is a bit of a mess. Now, you might be thinking it's a 20-year-old industry, it's going to be valued at over $20 billion in 2021. That doesn't seem so messy, but that's exactly what I'm talking about. We have been rushing forward so quickly into growth, we haven't bothered to look in the rearview mirror and see if we're headed in the right direction. And this has led to the inefficiency and errors that are all over our operations today. Today, we're going to talk about 6 reasons why eDiscovery is a mess. And we've identified these 6 opportunities for error because we consider them flagship opportunities, which means not only do they pop up in your everyday operations, but they can lead to other issues downstream. So if you nip one here, you can nip a whole bunch down the road. Additionally, we've chosen these 6 because not all of them are where you might expect to find your errors. And that's a part of our holistic approach. We want to approach things like a chiropractor. If you have a pain in your neck, we're not just going to look at your neck for a solution. We're going to try to find the source of the problem, whether it's in your hip, your knee, your ankle, wherever it might be. And then we're going to keep the whole body in play as we try to find a solution as well. So with that, I'm going to pass this on over to Austin, who's actually lived through all the pain we're about to discuss.
All right. Thanks, Jamie. Before we move forward, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with errors because some people might just consider it a typo. They might consider it a misform in the field, incorrect spec, but we also consider any deviation from a best practice to be something like that as well. That's because it might not be an immediate error, but it's leading to errors down the road, and we're trying to eliminate them before they happen. So we're not just looking at the immediate course of action, we're looking at the future workflows as well. So many of us have probably been in a room and we've had the conversation where we said, well, let's just get it done now and we'll circle back later. And let's be honest with ourselves. We almost never circle back later. And the problem with that is that it creates ad hoc workflows. So a majority of the industry recognizes that they are doing ad hoc workflows, but just because they're acknowledging that fact doesn't mean that the rest aren't also doing it and not acknowledging the fact. So there is probably a large amount of people out there who are doing ad hoc workflows and not acknowledging that at this point in time. And the problem with this is that it leads to what we call decentralized best practices. So you might have experienced this when you've been working with your preferred vendor and you get a brand new PM and you ask them to do something and they say, oh, we can't do that. And you know that they definitely can do it because they've done it for you in the past. Well, it's not because this PM isn't great. It's not because they can't do their job. It's because the person that you're working with this before had a different best practice that they were utilizing, and this person's unaware of it. So of course they're going to look at this and they're going to go, okay, well, you asked this, we've done this, they're great, they're going to do it for you. But what ends up happening as a result of this is now that ad hoc workflow that your previous favorite PM did is being now doubled in size because a new ad hoc workflow is being created. And we have to deal with the repercussions of even more ad hoc workflows continuing to compound within that organization. And the problem here is if every single team member is doing the thing their own way, well, they can't help each other. So if you get stuck in a situation where your PM that you're working with is overloaded and they're doing an ad hoc workflow and somebody else can't help them, well, then you're at the mercy of waiting for them to get help from somebody that doesn't know how to help them. And that's just a really bad position we put in. And it's even worse when we talk about turnover. And the fact of the matter is, this is a high turnover industry. So if somebody is the creator of an ad hoc workflow and nobody else knows how to do it but the person that created that workflow, what happens when they leave? A new person in the industry is not going to know, and a new PM on the project isn't going to know. And it's really important to recognize that if they don't know how to replicate it, you're going to get yet another ad hoc workflow compounding the effects that we're already talking about. Even if your organization isn't experiencing high attrition rates, any organization that is touching your workflow and is having high attrition rate is exposing you to those same inefficiencies and errors. And overall, what does this lead to? Well, we came across these stats and frankly, we were stunned. We figured lawyers are billing more often, they're adding more value add. And the truth of the matter is that they're spending a lot of time doing menial work. And that's just unacceptable in our minds. If we take a look at the spaghetti diagram, this is an outline of all the interactions that take place between the different organizations that are trying to start a project in eDiscovery. And these interactions aren't just an email. It's email, phone, text, Slack, Teams, communication devices we haven't even heard of yet. Maybe Snapchat? Who knows? You tell me, there's too many of them. The problem with all of this is it's creating opportunities for miscommunication. And it's not necessarily the fault of any individuals in these communication paths. It's the fact that there are so many different places that it's bound to get lost at some point in time. And that can be mission critical type of information that is getting lost just because they didn't get the post-it note. And so what happens when there's all these different communication modes with all these opportunities for error in our communications? Well, judges are recognizing that 59% of the time, the errors that happen in eDiscovery are either related to poor cooperation between the parties or miscommunications between the internal team members at your organization. And if judges are noticing this, that's really problematic because that means something's gone wrong with your production and they're seeing that end result. So what's happening upstream that you're patching over and making sure they don't see and still allowing for this amount of error to get in front of them? And when it gets in front of them, that's when you lose cases. So let's say you've gone through and you've addressed a lot of these issues. You don't have high turnover, you don't have decentralized best practices, everyone's working like a well-oiled machine. Well, how do you really know that you're doing a great job? If you're not reporting, you can't. So I'll give you an example. Somebody comes to you and they say, hey, we produce a privileged document. And first of all, if your heart starts beating again, good for you. But before that, you're going to want to know, well, how did this happen? And if you're not tracking who did what, when, why, where, all of those questions, and you can't immediately point to that, you don't really know. And the truth of the matter is, not much of the industry thinks that they're actually tracking this well. And that's really scary because if you don't know exactly what went wrong, you're exposed to making that exact mistake again. And that's not a fun position to be in. I really hope none of you ever have to find yourself in that. But the truth of the matter is most of this industry finds themselves in that position.
All right, Austin, thank you. That's very depressing. But hey, it's true. And even if you only identified with one of the 6 that Austin just ran through there, please understand that they're all interconnected. Going back to the chiropractor example from earlier, if you've got a pain in your neck, it could be coming from anywhere. And likewise, if you've got a pain with heavy turnover, who's to say it's not because of an issue with your efficiency on the other end? So if you have an error in one place, it can be coming from anywhere. And that's a part of identifying problems via the intuitive standardization approach. Well, the good news is intuitive standardization can solve all of the problems we've just discussed. So now we're going to explore a few of the principles that we employ via intuitive standardization to show you just how it works. The first is systems thinking. Systems thinking is the analysis of a process from a holistic point of view. A perfect example of this is Mini Cooper. If you were to go online today to design yourself a Mini Cooper hardtop, you could end up creating any one of 10 million possible outcomes for your custom Mini Cooper. That means every time you select a different grille, a different color of paint, etc., 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 you're leading your way down a path to a Mini Cooper that could be the first of its kind. And yet, that car can be built by a fully automated assembly line. So how can Mini do this? Well, Mini mapped out every possible variable within their customization engine as they built it, which meant there was no option you could choose that could lead to another option that couldn't be built. Thus, no matter how I build my Mini Cooper, that's going to be unique to only me, it's within the ecosystem that the assembly line can build. And we can do the same with our eDiscovery operations. By mapping out our workflows from start to finish, identifying and mapping every possible if-then variable, we're creating our own fully standardized yet customizable assembly line. There's a lot of time that goes into mapping these things out, but once you do, you'll realize there are no special workflows. There are only different outcomes within the same assembly line. Next up, we've got just-in-time learning. Just-in-time learning is making the information required to perform a task available to the participant in real time. Now let's say you've built your mini assembly line for your operations, which is great, but you're still noticing from time to time teams get the inclination that they need to create a custom or special workflow. It's not that they need to create something wholly new. What it probably is that you failed to identify one variable in your map. And that is totally understandable. These are complex things we're talking about here. Another issue that you might run into is that your team is struggling to access your best practices. They want to do the right thing, they just can't find the information to do the right thing while they're doing it. Imagine I'm underneath my Mini trying to figure out where the carburetor or something is. I don't know, I'm not a car guy. Now imagine I'm trying to find how to fix this thing in a 300-page manual. It's never going to happen, right? The third issue might be that you have got your best practices where people can find them, but you just updated them 3 weeks ago. There's a new way to find the carburetor now, but I'm still looking at the way I learned how to do it 3 weeks ago. And so I'm going to run into trouble here as well. Well, with just-in-time learning, we can solve all three of these problems very easily. For starters, if you're working off of a checklist, and if you are, good for you, link your best practices to the checklist. This can be as simple as a hyperlink in a digital document. Just make sure before I check that box, I know what I'm checking and I know it up to date. Second, if you can integrate best practices into your ticketing system, go for it. The more information you have for folks right there when they need it in the midst of doing a task, the more likely they are to reference that and thus do things the way you want them to, avoiding errors. And thirdly, if you have a new best practice and it's integrated into the workflow, highlight it, underline it. Let folks know in any visual way that something has changed with this best practice, and they're that much more likely to actually click on it and learn the new way of doing things. So you can keep everybody up to speed all of the time. So just-in-time learning can put the tools your folks need to do the job right at their fingertips. But even a just-in-time learning module can get very long when we're talking about a software like Relativity. So how do we keep things simple to ensure that even once folks have hit their just-in-time learning module, they're going to actually be able to absorb the information on the other side? This is where UX design comes in. UX design is the process of creating products that are practical and usable. Again, Apple is the masters of these, and as the great product designer for Apple for the past 20 years, Jonathan Ive, once said, true simplicity is about bringing order to complexity. This isn't about dumbing down a massive, robust product like Relativity. This is about making it easier to understand and use for the folks who actually have to get in there and click the buttons. We can apply UX design to our workflows in a number of ways. For starters, if you make something look nice, people want to engage with it. This goes back to what we were talking about with Apple. And if I can relieve some of your stress by making any part of your work experience easier, you're more likely to stick around, and that's going to help with the turnover issue we discussed earlier. Furthermore, if I can limit the number of form fields per page to no more than 6, I might have 10 pages, but each of those is very manageable, very easy to QC, double check for errors in real time, and much less stressful to take on as a whole. I'm doing the same amount of work, but it doesn't feel that way. And that's the whole point with UX design. We get our just-in-time learning modules right there where they need to be. And overall, we've got a much more enjoyable process that's actually more efficient as well.
Awesome. Well, Jamie just went through and he described how to make these workflows enjoyable and executable. But even if we're killing it on all those fronts, we want to make sure that that's the optimized workflow for what we're trying to accomplish. And this is where Lean Six Sigma comes in. Simply understood, it's increasing efficiency while simultaneously improving quality. If we go back to the spaghetti diagram that we looked at earlier, we can take just a piece of that communication stream and turn it into a value stream map. And if you look at the slide here, you can see that there are 4 delays in just trying to identify where the data is, what project it's assigned to, and then what workflow it's supposed to go to. And by simply providing that information up front, so what project it is, what the tracking number is for that data, and what the workflow it is going for, we can eliminate 3 of those 4 delays. And that makes us way more efficient, but at the same time, those interactions were opportunities for error. So we're eliminating those as well. And that not only is making us faster, but it's improving our quality at the exact same time. So our workflow is enjoyable, executable, and now it's even better than it was because we applied Lean Six Sigma. Another way that we can augment these workflows is through evidence-based management. And that is applying the scientific method to business. So let's say you've already gone through and you have checklists and you're ready to rock and you know exactly how everyone's going to do the same centralized best practices. Well, an incredible way that you can create insights that drive evidence-based management is by simply, instead of putting a check mark next to the step that you completed, you put an initial next to it. And this creates a ton of information naturally as you're just going through these workflows. Essentially what you can do is you can look at that and say, hey, an error was made, who made it, and then you can refer back to all the other times errors are made, and you can make a quick analysis. And that analysis is this. Is it the same person making the same mistake over and over and over again? That's a person problem. You need to train them up so that they can do that part of the step correctly. Or is it multiple people making the same mistake over and over and over again? Well, that means there's something wrong with the step because everyone else is making mistakes too. That means you have to upgrade that step so that it's doing what you need people to do in order to have an efficient workflow. And this is great because it's really simple, and instead of having to run all these regressions and apply calculus and do all these models, you're just asking yourself 2 simple questions. And instead of getting a correlative answer like you do with all those regressions and math and blah, 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 none of us like it, that's why we're all here. We're doing a causal analysis, and we can figure out how to make this workflow better asking really simple questions. Who doesn't like that? So we're going through all of this, and we're making our workflows better and better. And this is really where continuous improvement comes into play. And that is simply understood as a gradual and methodical approach to improvement. Now, the key to making sure that your continuous improvement program works is you have to first recognize that there's a lot of value in incremental improvement. Can you just get a new best practice done? Just one. Well, get it done. Can you eliminate just one 5-minute delay? Get rid of it. Well, yeah, it's just 5 minutes, but if you do that same task 1,000 times a year, that's 5,000 minutes you've gotten rid of, and it all adds up. Now, the tricky part here is that these small incremental improvements don't really look that powerful unless you're tracking them. So you have to report them because, like I said, if it's just 5 minutes, well, it only looks powerful when it's 5,000 minutes, and you can only figure that out if you're reporting on it. And then as you're reporting on all of these things, you can run an analysis and you can figure out, okay, well, where are we going correct? Where do we need to, refocus ourselves? How can we figure out how to make this more optimal? So a really simple example of that is, well, how many best practices have we written over the last 3 months? And what is our error rate over those last 3 months? And you can look at that and make a really simple analysis. Well, hey, we wrote 100 and we have 40% less errors. That right there tells you you're on the right direction, and it doesn't have to be complex, but you're still figuring out how to continue to refine and continuously improve. And that's what this is really all about. So Jamie and I have talked a lot about all these theories, about all these applications that you could do, but none of it really matters until the rubber hits the road, right? So I want to run you through a quick example of something that I did myself. And it starts very simple and very humble. And I think that this can really prove that you don't have to figure it all out in a day, but if you start figuring it out right now, you can get to where you want to be. So I worked with an organization, and our first step was very simple. We said, hey, we're going to apply systems thinking. We are going to map out all of our workflows, create our mini. Then what we're going to do is we're going to set aside 30 minutes, and we're going to say, okay, we're going to spend just 30 minutes to map each workflow out a day. And then if we get to the end of 30 minutes and we haven't done the whole thing, doesn't matter. We're going to say, hey, we'll talk to the person who's in charge, and they will tell you exactly what to do if we didn't get to this variance. The truth of the matter is, we really never got to that variance, so it didn't matter that we didn't get there. But at the same time, we were able to get that incremental improvement just to get down the road just a little bit. The next thing we did was we integrated just-in-time learning. So we created best practices, we hyperlinked them into our documentation. At that point in time, we tested them on new hires, and we got some information back. They said, hey, I understand what I need to do, but it's really hard to navigate the software. There's so many buttons all over the place. I don't know where to go. And then there was that aha moment for why UX design is so important. All we had to do is take a picture, point an arrow at the button, and then say, hey, do this step. Here's your picture that makes it easy to find out where that step is being executed, and you're off to the races. Well, that was the case. They were able to easily navigate, and all of a sudden we weren't getting any feedback on, well, I get what you want me to do, but I don't know how to find it. They had it figured out just like that because of UX design. So we stumbled into our next success, and that was because we were talking to an application engineer, and we had explained that we had mapped out all of our quality control processes. And she said that because we knew exactly what we needed to QC every single time, she could build an application to do it instantaneously. So not only were we getting faster at running that QC because we didn't have to set up all these searches and click all these buttons and do all this work, we also eliminated the human error of somebody incorrectly setting up a search. And that made us faster and less error prone. We also happened to, at the very beginning, use the initials instead of check marks when we were doing our checklists. And so we were able to run that question, well, is it the same person making the same mistake, or is it multiple people making the same mistake? And we really were able to do this in a way that allowed us to really refine. And over this period of time, we experienced a lot of benefits. So within 3 months, we were able to reduce our error rate by 90%. We reduced our team size by half. So we went from 10 people to 5 people. We didn't get rid of them. We just sent them to other projects that needed more help because we didn't need it. And we had people onboarding not in 6 months to a year, but in 2 weeks. So a 90% faster onboarding time. And we did a little analysis, and it was about a $3 million a year savings. And all we did was sit down and say, hey, here's a checklist. Let's create it by systems mapping it, doing some evidence-based management, throwing some just-in-time learning in there, everything we've talked about. And we didn't solve it in a day, but with determination and a desire to get rid of errors, we were able to hit it.
And that's what intuitive standardization is all about. It's about making incremental changes that altogether overhaul the way things work. Rome wasn't built in a day, and you're not going to change your organization overnight. But step by step, little by little, you can make changes that, when backed by reporting that shows how successful they are, make champions of the whole company and change the way that your operations are done. We hope everybody really enjoyed this presentation as much as we enjoyed putting it together. We're very passionate about solving these issues in eDiscovery, and we encourage you to take them on yourself. You guys have the power to do it. Just take it step by step. And if you need a little help, you can always reach out to us.